Howdy, welcome back to Wobble Enjoy Sports. If you're new around here, hope I can get you to consider to like the content and subscribe to the channel. But if you're a regular around these here parts, thank you very much for the continuous support. Parramatta Eels for 2025, I think, while there's a handful of teams that fit into this category, I do think that Parramatta Eels are the great unknown into this season. I just don't know. I don't think a lot of people know what to make of how new coach Jason Riles is going to have them revved up on a weekly basis, and the brand new additions to their squad. It's going to make them terribly unpredictable, very, very dangerous, and let's see how their fixture goes for 2025. Eels have two games in the preseason like everybody else, and match number one is Newcastle and Newcastle, and game number two is against the West Tigers at Leichhardt Oval. Now into their first 5 weeks for 2025, and the Melbourne Storm are their first opponents, and it emanates down at Amy Park Sunday 3 p.m. And then they have back-to-back home games at CommBank Stadium. Match number one is against the Tigers. Match number two is against the Bulldogs. Both of their games are happening Channel 9 Sunday afternoon footy. Round four, they're back on the road to take on the Manly Warringah Sea Eagles at 4 Pines Park in the same spot. Round number five, they take on the St. George Illawarra Dragons back at CommBank. That is going to be a massive occasion. Clint Gutherson returns to take on his old teammates at CommBank for Saturday afternoon footy, 2 o'clock kickoff or 3 o'clock kickoff if you're living in New South Wales. Couple of things here. It is rivalry month, basically, for Parramatta. They are taking on, arguably, besides the big Western Sydney Derby, they're taking on their biggest rivals inside the first 5 weeks of the competition. So it's going to be a pretty intense start for them. Look, that's a good start for Parramatta. Riles, and I'm sure his players would be very much anticipating the challenge that awaits them, taking on Melbourne in round one, and then the rest of pretty much their biggest rivals on paper over the next month. But I'll be buggered if I know how the NRL can look. I'm sorry to all Parramatta Eels fans, but I'm buggered if I know how they can look at the Eels and say they deserve the first 4 Channel 9 Sunday afternoon games. They finished in the bottom 3 for 2024. I know why. They're huge. They could be even bigger. But for them to have the first 4 games of Sunday afternoon footy, I don't know, that's kind of bewildering to me. But other than that, that's a pretty big first 5 weeks for the Parramatta Eels. Part number 2 for the Parramatta Eels begins with their final home game ever at TO Stadium in Darwin. They take on the Canberra Raiders Saturday 7:30 p.m. On Easter Monday, round number 7, they take on the West Tigers, and they are technically the away side. And what helps them this year is that the Tigers and the Panthers are using CommBank as home venues and hosting Parramatta. So Eels have a bit of a Brisbane Broncos leg up in the idea that they actually kind of get 2 extra home games in a sense for 2025. And then it is their first bye of the year in round number 8. They're back in action against the Cronulla Sutherland Sharks for Magic Round, the first game to kick off that weekend. And in round number 10, they have their first home game at CommBank Stadium in a month or a little bit over when they host the Dolphins for Thursday night footy. So in terms of opposition, the Sharks, that's going to be tough. Easter Monday, you never know, but they can definitely nab a few wins inside this 5-week stretch between round 6 and round number 10. Part 3 for the Parramatta Eels, they hit the road to take on the Knights up in the Hunter Valley. That is Friday 6 p.m. 1 week later, they play on a split round. They take on the Sea Eagles at CommBank for Friday night footy. A few days after Game 1 of State of Origin, they remain at CommBank, this time as the away team. They take on the Penrith Panthers, so it's hard to say if there will be any State of Origin representatives backing up to play for their clubs on this night. Sorry, that is Sunday afternoon footy, by the way, sorry. And in round number 14, dangerous game here for the Parramatta Eels. The Bulldogs are hosting the King's Birthday match against Parramatta on the Monday. I think I said that it'd be close to about 3 weeks that the fans and players alike wouldn't have seen or played together for over 3 weeks as a full strength unit. And this is the first time that they do so. This is a pretty massive game for the Dogs, and they need to be switched on, the Parramatta Eels, for this game on the King's birthday holiday game. And round number 15, they have their second bye for 2025. So in terms of opposition, it's a lot of rivalry games. Again, you've got Manly and Penrith for the first time this year, and then the Bulldogs again. Yeah, it's very much a consistent intensity in terms of opposition that they're facing. It's Manly, and then it's the Panthers. It's a onslaught of their rivalries every second week, it feels like, for Parramatta. Part 4 for the Eels sees them come off the bye and host the Gold Coast Titans on Sunday, or for a Sunday twilight game. They then travel down to Wollongong to take on the Dragons in round 17, Saturday twilight footy. And thanks to Rugby League Project, who I'm going to, what's the word here? What are the words I'm looking for here? That I'm going to have more of an onus of highlighting in 2025. If you follow this channel, you know who the Rugby League Project is, or what the Rugby League Project is. So I'm going to provide a link in the description below. But thanks to Rugby League Project, this will be the first game that the Parramatta Eels will have played at WIN Stadium since the year 2018. So a strong 7 years since they've last played in Wollongong. In round number 18, they then do have their third and final bye. Round number 19, a few days after Game 3 of State of Origin, they take on the Penrith Panthers at CommBank, Sunday, 4 p.m. Hard to say who will back up, if any will back up. And just to backtrack as well, the game against the Gold Coast Titans in round 16 is happening 4 odd days after Game 2 that emanates from Perth at Optus Stadium. Hard to say who'll back up from that. That will be interesting to see if someone like a Mitch Moses does back up to play on Sunday twilight footy. But overall, not a lot of opportunities for Origin representation except for that game against the Dragons down at Wollongong. That's going to be a bit tricky, part number 4. The run to the finals for the Parramatta Eels looks like this. They start with back-to-back away games. They are away to the Raiders for Saturday afternoon footy. They're then taking on the Brisbane Broncos for Friday night footy up at Suncorp Stadium. It's not a short turnaround, but that's a lot of zigging and zagging, hopping on planes, trains and automobiles to get from point 1 to point 2. They then are back at home for Thursday night footy to take on the Melbourne Storm. And 1 week later, they have another game at CommBank, back-to-back home games. They take on North Queensland for the first and only time this season for Channel 9's Sunday afternoon footy. Saturday night footy in round 24, 1 week later, they play a game at Allianz Stadium. It's not against Easts, it's against Souths. Round number 25, they play the Sydney Roosters for Saturday night footy. Round 26 is their final away game for the year. They travel across the ditch to play the New Zealand Warriors at Go Media Stadium for Friday night footy. That's a 6 o'clock game here in Australia. And the final game of not just their season, but of the entire home and away regular season emanates from CommBank Stadium. It's the Parramatta Eels versus the Newcastle Knights for Channel 9 Sunday afternoon footy. So that's a 50-50 split, which is great. Strength of opposition, you do have Brisbane and Melbourne in there. South Sydney is becoming a firmer and firmer contender to be a top 6 team in 2025. And then that game against the Warriors as well across the ditch will be a bruising encounter, as like it always is. So that run to the finals is not the easiest that I've seen. Like every other team, there's some yin and yang, but I try to ascertain if this team will make the 8 based off of the fixture that I study, that I look at. And I still can't tell you anything about the Parramatta Eels, unfortunately. They are more often at CommBank. They are more often in Sydney than they are not. But the strength of opposition, they take on their rivals. Like, there have been some years for Parramatta where you would see them take Penrith on once and Melbourne on once. But this year, 2025, they're taking on all of their rivalries twice. Dragons, Manly, Melbourne, Penrith Panthers, so on and so forth, West Tigers. So there's going to be a lot of intensity, a lot of media hype around it as well. Just seemingly, with all due respect, Parramatta does get a lot of media spotlight and representation whenever big rivalry games come about, like Manly or Penrith. Rightfully so, I guess. It's a good draw. It is a good draw. There are a couple of back-to-back away games. They have a few games where they're back-to-back at home. Do I think they'll make the 8? I think they're an absolute shot, just simply because they are so hard to predict on what they're going to do in 2025. But we wait and see. It all kicks off in just a matter of weeks, pre-season next weekend as well. So I'm sorry, I do sound very rattled. I am definitely wobbling my jaw at the moment, but they are my most unpredictable team for 2025, like I'm sure it is the same case for you and plenty of others out there as well. Thank you very much for your continuous support. Thank you for tuning in. Hope to see you guys in the next episode. Thank you. Take care. Adios. #RightandHigh 2025.